So she had all that musical influence and that cadence. So when she talked, you couldn't help but not listen and follow, and people would rise up in the audiences and just spontaneously start yelling and cheering and clapping, and then the music would, or she would just start singing, and then sometimes if there was music, the music would catch up. But there was just, and in their voices, even 50 years later, they were just in awe of her, in awe of her. And so many of them went on to go on to finish college, get graduate degrees, and become lawyers and fight for civil rights and do other things in their communities because of her.
Good evening. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's program for the screening of the powerful award-winning documentary, Fannie Lou Hamer's America. This documentary is an original documentary told through the public speeches, personal interviews, and powerful songs of the fearless Mississippi sharecropper turned human rights activist, Fannie Lou Hamer, known for being sick and tired of being sick and tired, and her impassioned pleas for equal rights. Fannie Lou Hamer helped change laws and was influential in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Besides her political advocacies during the 1960s, Hamer was also a humanitarian, providing clothing, housing, educational opportunities for the poor, and food for thousands through her Freedom Farm Cooperative and Pig Bank. This is a true honor for me as the executive director of Ford Hall Forum and our in legacy and our storied history of being the oldest free public lecture series in America. Fannie Lou Hamer was a courageous leader with a powerful voice and an unwavering commitment to justice. Her lasting legacy is a symbol of the fight for civil rights and human rights, continues to inspire social justice movements today. We need her voice today more than ever. This evening, we are joined by Joy Davenport, the film's director and editor, Monica Land, the executive producer of the film and niece of Fannie Lou Hamer, and Kate Clifford Larson, a best-selling author of a number of critically acclaimed biographies, one of which is Walk With Me, a biography of Fannie Lou Hamer. The evening's moderator is Tato Musa, an award-winning filmmaker, screenwriter, and playwright and illustrator. Her debut feature, Memoirs of a Black Girl, premiered at the 2021 Boston Globe Black History Film Festival and earned a Best Feature at both the 2021 Hamilton Black Film Festival and the 2021 Roxbury International Film Festival. She was also named Best Feature Director at the 2021 Hamilton Film Festival and selected in 2024 as the Stowe Narrative Lab with her new script, Rati, set in Botswana, and for the Writers Lab, a prestigious program that Meryl Streep is involved in. So we're really excited. Tato, I'm so happy to welcome you back to the Ford Hall Forum podium to, again, moderate a very important documentary film. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Prieto, Program Director of Our Bodies Ourselves at Suffolk University. It's been a privilege to partner with Our Bodies Ourselves on a number of programs around important women's rights. Laura is, in addition to being the program director at Our Bodies Ourselves, is a resident at Suffolk in the Center for Women's and Health and Human Rights, who will offer some welcoming remarks. So, Laura.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement before we move on with the program. on behalf of our bodies ourselves. We acknowledge that Boston is located on the traditional unceded territory of Indigenous peoples who have been brilliant stewards of this land and water for hundreds of generations. Specifically, the Massachusetts and Wampanoag First Nations peoples, along with particular recognition for the Pawtucket, Neponset, and Nipmuc peoples, who have traveled, lived, worked, and cared for their lands in and around Boston for tens of thousands of years. We extend respect and gratitude to all First Nations peoples who continue to live and steward in the cultural, spiritual, and educational customs of their ancestors. We also acknowledge the overwhelming violence, physical, cultural, environmental, and spiritual, that has been inflicted by colonialism for over 400 years, and which continues to this day to profoundly affect the lives of Indigenous peoples. We express our deep respect and appreciation for Massachusetts women, men, children, and elders, both leaders and ordinary people. And we also know that a land acknowledgement is not enough. We commit our bodies ourselves to honoring and lifting up Indigenous voices and perspectives in all of our work. As Susan graciously introduced, I'm Laura Prieto, the program director for Our Bodies Ourselves, which might be a name familiar to you. We are now a digital platform and a guide to bodies, sexuality, and health, especially for women and gender-expansive people. Those of you who are here in person might check out some of our materials in the lobby, and we are glad to hear from you. Our Bodies Ourselves is really honored to be co-sponsoring tonight's program with the Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University, our siblings at Suffolk University, and also, of course, with GBH World and GBH Forum. So thank you all for joining in this important film and discussion. We have a great deal to learn, not just about, but from Fannie Lou Hamer tonight. Subjected to poverty, racism, disenfranchisement, forced sterilization, sexual violence, and misogyny, Fannie Lou Hamer forged her experiences into an undaunted determination. She used her powerful voice and presence to demand justice. As she testified in 1971 at the founding meeting of the National Women's Political Caucus in Washington, D.C., nobody's free until everybody's free. We are living still in Fannie Lou Hamer's America and follow her lead on what we need to do about that. And now the film. Thank you.
An icon of civil rights history tells her own story in words and song. Fannie Lou Hamer's America.
And we got to let people know how we feel. We are not satisfied because we know this power.
I knew my mama, but I didn't really know who she was or what she stood for until a convention at the Martin Luther King Center. I think I was about 6 or 7. I heard her speaking, and she had that hand on her hip and she was reared back. When she got on that stage and started talking, there was silence, and everybody was watching her. And you could hear every word, even with me outside of that room, I could hear her. If you didn't want to sign up and register to vote after she got done with you, then I don't know what type of person you were.
One day you will be proud when you can say, Senator Fannie Lou Hamer, because I'm on my way there. Freedom is not something that's put in your lap. You got to stand up. I've been beaten in jail till my body was hard as metal, but I'm not stopping.
January 8th, 1966, from Fannie Lou Hamer to Rose Fishman. Rose, the mayor, told a friend of mine yesterday, "The day I move in that house, that's the day they will burn it." Rose, it's like waiting for a dangerous beast to come out. You know he is there, but you can't do anything but wait. My God, what will my family and I do but wait? Okay. She was a woman. You know, she was a woman that had feelings like every other woman. I mean, that persona that she reflected, everyone saw that, but then she went home. At home, she was the wife. At home, she was the mother. In one instance, she says in these letters to her dear friend Rose, she says, "Rose, I hate to keep bothering you, but I just need somebody to talk to." She moved men, women, to get up and walk in front of the police, the state troopers, to get up and to make a statement. But then here was a woman that didn't know how she was going to feed her family and was asking her friend for help.
See, Mississippi is not actually Mississippi's problem. Mississippi is America's problem. Because if America wanted to do something about what has been going on in Mississippi, it could have stopped by now. The flag is drenched with our blood. Because you see, we have never accepted slavery. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance. As we know, this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand that. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us. I really thought that the Federal Bureau of Investigators meant something. And I said, you know, if we ever tell this story to the Justice Department and let the FBI's know what's happening, I think our problem will soon be licked. But the last 2 FBI's was at my house. I told them, if I go to heaven and see you 2 guys up there, I'll tell God to send me back to Mississippi.
Because of her determination, dedication, laws were enacted. She was a very, very important part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. People are quick to attribute that to Dr. Martin Luther King and what happened in Selma, and that's okay. But you have the women in the background doing that grunt work also. Through her letters, she questioned as if she was making a difference at all. She was like, "Rose, I can't march anymore. You know, why are we doing this? Are we making a difference?"
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
She died before she saw so many things realized. And the even more unfortunate part is that here we are 50 plus years later, still fighting for the very same things that she was trying to get accomplished 50 years ago.
So what we mean by black power is we mean to have not only black political power, but black economic power. And this is what black power means. We want to have something to say about our destiny.
We used to go to different places with her, and I started learning the songs that they used to sing. Her singing had an urgency about it. An urgency for people to listen, for people to know that they were working for a cause, and everybody needed to join in.
My mother would sing this a lot, and my daddy would sing it too.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. I want you, Lord, to walk with me. She loved God, and she loved the Word of God. And anything that she did or said, she made sure that she walked, talked, and lived by the Word.
Today, I'm not ashamed of being black. I'm not ashamed of my history. 1962. Nobody knows that I exist. Nobody. And I hadn't heard of them either. And then one day, the 31st of August, I walked out off the plantation. And from that time up until now, I met a lot of people. I met a lot of great people, both blacks and white, people that we have
walked together, talked together, we've cried together. It's been very interesting to me.
There's some good people in this country. That's what gives me strength to keep going. Just like somewhere in Mississippi, whether he's afraid to speak out or not, somebody here is good. Some of these white people. And one day they'll speak out. And until that time, I have to fight until he get the nerve to say, we're gonna fight together. And people, whether you believe it or not, you better remember this today. A house divided against itself cannot stand. A nation that's divided against itself cannot stand. And it's 2 past midnight, and we on our way out.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to thank Susan and Laura for inviting me. And I'm excited to be in conversation with Kate and Joy and Monica, who's joining us from here in Zoom. Can you hear me, Monica? Okay, great. That was so, oh, this thing is, move it. Yeah, that was so powerful, so moving. I'm going to start with your bios, and I'll start with you, Joy. Joy Davenport is a multimedia director, producer, editor, and composer who specializes in building layered emotional narratives from archival sources. She approaches nonfiction media from a background of academic research and social advocacy. Her directorial debut, Fannie Lou Hamer's America, premiered nationally on PBS in February 2022 and received the International Documentary Association's award for the Best TV Feature Documentary. Her most recent film, New Hope Rondo, looks at the long history of gentrification in a small Pennsylvania town based out of Chicago, Illinois, where she lives with her best friend, a cat named Bikini. Monica, who's in Zoom, Monica Land is an award-winning filmmaker and journalist who has been writing for local and national media outlets for more than 3 decades. As the niece of the civil rights icon, Fannie Lou Hamer, Land has written numerous feature articles about Hamer. Her film, Fannie Lou Hamer's America, premiered on PBS and World Channel in February 2022. Later that year, it was awarded the Best TV Feature Documentary by the International Documentary Association. And in 2023, it was named the Best Documentary by the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communications, NAMIC. Land has worked on television programs for VH1 and WGN TV Chicago and has produced historical segments for Entertainment Tonight and A&E's Biography Channel. And Kate Clifford Lawson is the best-selling author of 4 critically acclaimed biographies. Walk With Me, a biography of Fannie Lou Hamer, published in 2021, received starred reviews and award nominations and was named one of the best biographies of 2021 from Kirkus, Library Journal, Christianity Today, and many more. Her other books include Rosemary, the Hidden Kennedy Daughter, which was published in 2015. The other book is Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, A Portrait of an American Hero, which was published in 2004. And lastly, The Assassin's Accomplice, Mary Surratt and the Plot to Kill Abraham Lincoln, which was published in 2008. An award-winning historical consultant, Lawson has worked on feature film scripts, including focus features Harriet, starring prize-winning Cynthia Erivo, and Robert Redford's The Conspirator. He has appeared on local, national, international media outlets, including CBS Sunday Morning. Welcome. I'm really honored to be in conversation with you all. This film has left me wanting to learn more. I'm obsessed with this remarkable woman. The film is deeply moving, and it's an urgent reminder that the fight for civil rights is from afar. And I'll start with you, Joy. I wanted to know what drew you to Fannie Lou Hamer's story, and what did you feel was missing in the public conversation about her when you began the project?
I was an undergraduate student at Florida State University when I first heard of Mrs. Hamer. And not just Mrs. Hamer, but really that whole part of history of the civil rights movement, of the real grassroots people power movement that wasn't taught where I grew up in Florida. The education system, whitewashing doesn't even go far enough for how they taught that movement. Mm-hmm. So when I learned about SNCC in particular, this intergenerational, intercaste, interracial group that was determined to have an integrated top to bottom movement to unite and save America, I was on fire. And it seemed like every single person I read about in that movement or spoke to in that movement mentioned Mrs. Hamer as the hub, her kitchen where everyone would meet, her songs that would inspire everybody when they were afraid. And I needed to know more about her. But the problem was that so much about her was not available, or was other people telling stories about her or speaking for her. A lot of materials were just unavailable. And so I only had this secondhand view of her. So the thing that was missing was her. You know, it was everybody else kind of telling us how important she was and what she did, but I wanted to hear from her. And so I got obsessed with archival and looking for oral histories, and linked up with Monica, and over a decade later, here we are.
How many hours did you have to spend watching that? Because you have an hour here. I'm wondering how much footage you had to go through.
Oh goodness, I don't have a number. There's so much. There's just so much. Dozens and dozens of hours of just raw material, and I wish all of it could be in there. You know, so many stories that she told, so many sound bites of her describing her experiences, just couldn't fit. But I would hesitate to pick a number, but yeah. Whatever number I pick, it would probably be more than that.
I understand that it took about, I think Monica mentioned 15 years. This is a journey. Can you tell me about that journey? Maybe Monica, you can first.
That's accurate, actually. When I first had the idea, it's very similar to Joy's. I had heard stories about Aunt Fannie Lou all my life growing up. And, the few memories that I have of her, were in her declining years. I was young, and unfortunately, she was giving into terminal cancer. And so when I would visit Mississippi from Chicago during the summers, my maternal grandfather, made sure that my mom, who was, Aunt Fannie Lou's niece, would go and visit her and Uncle Pat. And I remember that. But when we would come down here, I would see, she was laying down, she was ill. And so I regret this to this day, that I didn't have, I'll say, the sense or the knowledge to ask the questions that I should have been. So I'm like Joy in that everything that I pretty much learned about her, I learned from other people. And so wanting to, let everyone hear that side of her because she was 44 years old when she, got into activism. She had a life prior to that. And I thought it would just be so cool, to let her family, speak about who she was prior to that. Well, we couldn't find the footage. Well, that started in about 2005 when I had the idea. And I reached out to my cousin, Sula Hamer, who was a feature film producer. She'd done Love Field with Michelle Pfeiffer, Unlawful Entry with Ray Liotta, and The Accused with Jodie Foster. But she didn't know anything about documentary film. So she said, you should call Keith Beauchamp. And so Keith had just done The Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till. And so I did. I called him. He put me with Davis Houck, who is now the Fannie Lou Hamer Professor of Rhetorical Studies at Florida State. Davis connected me to Joy and to Megan. And so we had our team. That was in 2005. And so because we all had different things going on, time was really the issue at first. And so around 2016, we thought, okay, we have to do this. It's time to really commit to doing this. That was, the objective. So we started trying to raise money for it. And we got our first grant in 2017, and it went from there. And of course, from 2005 to 2022, when it finally aired, that's 15 years, 17 years. So it took a long time. And once we committed to doing it, finding the footage, like Joy said, because a lot of it is not documented, it was literally a search for treasure, hidden treasure, where we finding this material. And then finding the money. Films of this nature are archival, are crazy expensive. And so finding donors and sponsors who would help us pay for it was the other issue.
Can you talk to us more about, because you, as a great niece, I'm curious about Fannie Lou as a mother, as an aunt, as a wife, as a daughter, because we know the public Fannie Lou, but I'm just curious about some of the stories you had, because I know you were young when she was on her way out of this world, but I'm curious to know what some of the things you've had from you as a mother too, as a mother and as an aunt.
Well, actually what you saw in the film is pretty much who she was. She was an upbeat person. She had a wicked sense of humor, sometimes very raunchy. But, being a Southerner, she was very hospitable. As I said, when we went to Mississippi to visit her when I was a child, even though she was laying down, being a Southerner, go on in the kitchen and get you something to eat. There was, if it was just, biscuits and bacon from breakfast, it was something in the kitchen, made you feel very at home, very hospitable. And like I said, I really regret that I did not have the foresight to sit with my, my mother, my grandfather, my father, and talk with her. I was off playing with her kids. These two grandkids, Cookie and Nook, who were around the same age as I was a kid. And so I went off with them instead of, sitting and listening to her. And I will forever regret that. And even my Uncle Pat, who was my maternal grandfather's brother, even once she had passed, I didn't know to talk to him, and ask him questions. My maternal grandparents were very, very close to her. I didn't have the foresight to question them, so things like that I regret. But as I said, I hear all these stories. She was very funny. She loved to cook. She loved to laugh. As far as being a mother, that was kind of a bittersweet thing because she had lost children that were stillborn. She could not have children. Uncle Pap was actually her second marriage. It was the second marriage for both. Uncle Pap had been married and had children, and she could not have any because of this ovarian tumor that she had. And of course, when she was sterilized, the Mississippi appendectomy, without her knowledge or consent, children were completely out of the question, which is so strange because she was so drawn to children. She loved children. And that's what led to her adopting those 4 girls, which were all actually family members. They were family members, nieces and nephews, cousins of hers, whose own families couldn't take care of them. And even Uncle Pat's children, she helped take care of those kids, raise those kids. One in particular, so she loved them, even though she had the heartache of knowing that she would never be able to have any on her own. And she was good to them. She was very good to them.
One of my favorite story about her is when she talked about her mother and the black doll. I thought that was really moving. And I thought about my own childhood. And when I encountered a black doll, I think I was in my 20s, not too. So I was, that was really, I love that she was, her mom really pushed her, inspired her to be who she was, to find her voice and respect for herself. And to you, Kate, what made you, what brought you to the story? I know you were not involved with the documentary, but you wrote the biography. Can you tell me more about why you chose Fannie Lou Hamer?
So in graduate school, I learned about her. I hadn't learned about her in undergraduate back in the 70s. And when I went to graduate school in the 1990s, I learned about her and I was fascinated by her. But my work focused on an earlier century, Harriet Tubman, slavery and freedom, etc. But she always stuck in the back of my mind. There's something about Fannie Lou that you can't shake. She just, once she touches you or gets to you, you can't let her go. So after the Rosemary Kennedy book, I was thinking about my next project, and she came really loud in my head, and it was time to start looking at her life. And I think it was the right time for me because all of a sudden a lot of material about her became available. The Library of Congress had started digitizing a lot of interviews about her with other former civil rights activists and documents. There were different libraries around the country and universities that were gathering civil rights information and documents. The SNCC workers, they were donating their materials to universities. And all of a sudden, this material was ready and I could access it. I do have to give a shout out to archivists and librarians around the world, around this country, because the great bulk of my work happened as the pandemic started and I couldn't travel to some of the places. And those archivists and librarians would go into the libraries because no one was allowed to go in, and they would scan things for me and email them to me. And that is, the work that librarians and archivists do is just incredible. So I had to call them out. But once I started looking into her life, I could not drop her. She just, there's something about her. You heard her voice. And what I love about this film is to hear, there's so many things, even in my research, I didn't come across some of those clips of her. So powerful. And if you can imagine being in a room with her, just like here, and she's on stage. And what I got is interviewing some of those SNCC workers who met her and were in those rooms, and how powerfully she moved them. And some of them, even today, or when I interviewed them a few years ago, some of them would start to cry on the phone talking about her. They just remembered that emotion and how important she was to them, how she pushed them to do more and to be the best that they could be. And you could hear it in their voices. So to hear this is really, it's fantastic.
One of the things that I really love about this film is the fact that it's her voice. It's her, there's no talking heads. There's no anyone sort of like sharing information. And I love the singing too. Like that's her singing. I had no idea that she could sing. I wanted to know for you as a director, why did you choose to approach it this way? And by the way, it reminds me of I'm Not Your Negro with James Baldwin, where it was just purely his voice and archival footage. Why was it important to approach it this way as a storyteller?
It was important for narrative and ethical reasons. And also Raoul Peck's film about James Baldwin came out while we were working on this, and it felt like it kind of gave us permission. It's like people will want this. But on the narrative side of it, I was just kind of bored of talking head documentaries. I felt like putting a narrator or a historian or just like a third person in between the audience and the subject is really distancing and really demotivating. And the power of Mrs. Hamer is in the moment. It's when you're listening to her, it's the, you know, her stump speech, or it's her song, or it's her rallying cry. And nobody can describe that to you. It's like trying to describe the most beautiful sunrise. Like, you know, everybody's seen a sunrise, but when you experience it, it can bring tears to your eyes, or light you on fire, or stir your passions. And so it was important as a director to bring that passion to the audience and let them experience the stump speech, because that's how she would tell her story in front of audiences. Is she would not necessarily tell it in order, or she would not necessarily just tell you, she'd sing it too. And so I wanted an audience to get that experience of being in the room with her. But also around the time that Raoul Peck's documentary about James Baldwin came out, you know, there was a lot of conversation about who gets to speak for who.
Yeah.
And as a white person making a film about a Black person, it felt just wrong for me to write a script or to narrate or to ask other people to tell me what to say about her. I thought the only ethical way for me to proceed as the director of this film would be to turn it over to Mrs. Hamer and let her tell the story, and to stick to what she said and not put words in her mouth and not get between her and the audience, to actually become the platform and her megaphone so that she can just come directly to the people. And so narratively and ethically, the paths converged to create this film.
And one of the things that I love was her songs. And I have to talk about, it turns out that you composed the score, which is remarkable. Can you tell me, talk to me how you approached the scoring for the documentary, and how Hamer's spiritual and freedom songs influenced the musical language of the film?
So the very first cut of the film that I made was only audio because of this decision to just use her voice. So we had to figure out, you know, is there enough voice to carry a full hour of film? And so I laid it all out, and there were, you know, you had to transition at different points. And as I was listening to all of her speeches, even outside of her songs, just the way she spoke had this cadence, this like preacherly movement. And so it just brought me back to church. And I started to conceive of my role as being her praise band, to compose that backing music that would let her preach. And that sometimes if we have to shift moods or shift storylines, that's when I can step in a little bit and riff to get us to the next song or the next story, and then back off again and let her take the stage. And so every piece of music in there is composed based on a song that she sang, so that it would lead into that song. So the cotton segment has a lot of hand claps and stomps and piano, and it's all in the rhythm and the key of Pick a Bale of Cotton, which she would sing at the end of that segment. Same with Go Tell It on the Mountain when she is going to the Democratic National Convention. All of the music in that segment is in the tempo and key of that song, so that when we land there, it's this natural handoff to let her go. So I felt like that's where I could bring my passion, is I can kind of riff with her, and I'm shaking a little bit thinking about it, because it's so much fun making that music and being her backing band.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Very impressed.
Yeah.
You also edited the film, like partly. Wow. Monica, Hamer's speech at the 1964 Democratic National Convention was a turning point. What kind of presence did she carry after that moment? How did her life and your family's life change after that national exposure?
Well, her life changed tremendously, because it became a springboard for, as Joy was talking about, all of these video clips that we came across. It just seemed almost a crime that we couldn't use them all because we just kept finding them. I really believe that after that, Aunt Fannie Lou was probably the most visible female speaker of that time. Because when we were looking for, a video clip of something, there she popped up a lot of times in footage that we didn't even know that she was in. And it just broke my heart. Like Joy said, I think Joy did maybe 3 rough cuts. And I think the second one, the first, they were all great, but I think the second one was my favorite. And a lot of those clips, when World Channel and GBH did the final cut, they cut those out. They hit the floor, and I really fought to get some of those clips in, but they had the ultimate decision, and they said no. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to accomplish with her website, her educational website, Fannie Lou Hamer's America.com, is to place all of that footage, or at least snippets of it, so that future archivists and researchers don't have to work as hard as we did to find the footage. It was just, and I'm really surprised because even now, as I continue to do research for the education website, I'm still finding footage that I've never heard before, interviews that I've never heard before. And so trying to put all of these things into one place. And so, again, that convention, even though Lyndon Johnson tried so hard to take the attention off of her, by, spontaneously announcing, hey, this is 9 months that President Kennedy was assassinated, it really had the opposite effect because it just made her so, her voice so much louder. And it seems like everyone was trying to, get an interview with her. And we continue to see that to this day.
And Kate, you interviewed many of the SNCC members who were directly inspired by her. What did they share about her influence on the organization? And what did they remember most vividly about working with her?
As I had said earlier, many of them were very emotional talking about her, but also so she was very motherly with some of them because some of them were teenagers and in their early 20s, and she was in her 40s at the time. And so she was very welcoming, as Monica said, the family. Those SNCC students would go to her house. She would cook food. Pap, her husband, would cook food for all of them. So they felt they were part of a family, and they felt valued. She made sure that they felt valued. In fact, she felt that they were the most amazing kids and that they represented Christianity far better than people who professed that they were these great Christians that were doing the good things in the world. But she said that those kids were the ones that were really changing the world. And so they followed her. They looked to her for guidance and for inspiration. And Joy, you mentioned that cadence that she had because her father was a Baptist minister. So going to church, listening to him, the way he gave his sermons, singing in church, singing out in those fields, the work songs. Delta Blues was established 6 miles from where she lived in Ruleville. So she had all that musical influence and that cadence. So when she talked, you couldn't help but not listen and follow, and people would rise up in the audiences and just spontaneously start yelling and cheering and clapping, and then the music would, or she would just start singing, and then sometimes if there was music, the music would catch up. But there was just, and in their voices, even 50 years later, they were just in awe of her, And so many of them went on to go on to finish college, get graduate degrees, and become lawyers and fight for civil rights and do other things in their communities because of her. Yeah.
She was amazing. I can't help think about our current time. When I watch this film, I'm just thinking, are we living in the now? I think one of the things when she was asked, speaking at the Atlantic City, and she said, "What is America?" and I'm asking myself, what is America right now? I wanted to kind of talk about like how this film is still like speaks to the now, even though this was like in the 1960s. Can you talk a little bit about that now?
Definitely. I was sitting in the wings watching this film, and I've seen it dozens of times, and I was struggling to hold in tears, because I was thinking of Los Angeles. I was thinking of Columbia University. I was thinking of Ramzea Ozturk and Mahmoud Khalil, all of these people who are just trying to live as decent human beings in America. And she's speaking about them. And we are living in Fannie Lou Hamer's America still. And until we listen and act and make our actions into a movement, we will continue to be in this place where they can drag you out of your house and disappear you without any rule of law. I look at the Citizens Council segment where I put a lot of archival materials on the screen, their pamphlets and their propaganda. Everything that was in those pamphlets talking about curbing the Supreme Court, talking about rolling back integration. They won. They did that. They closed down their organization in 1989 because they had just gone mainstream. And what we're seeing right now, the people in power are the children of the segregationists who have worked tirelessly to undo the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, take over every institution that can protect regular, decent human beings in America. And it's our job now to take it back. And it's hard to watch this and realize how much time we wasted. And I hope that we can do justice to Mrs. Hamer's words and say that this is America with pride one day.
Kate, do you want to respond to that?
I don't know how I can add any more to that. It's just, it is stunning that here it is 70 years later and we're still fighting the same thing. And we need Fannie Lou Hamer today. We need Fannie Lou Hamers today. And what I'll say about that is that there are Fannie Lou Hamers in our communities today, and we should see them, really see them and support them, because we're not all Fannie Lou Hamer, but we can support the Fannie Lou Hamers out there. She had people who supported her and encouraged her and helped elevate her. We need to do that in all of our communities today. Find those Fannie Lou Hamers, find those Harriet Tubmans, find all those people and elevate them to help push back on what's happening again today.
Thank you. Monica, do you want to add anything?
No, Joy, said it so well. I'll add just this brief comment. Joy and I, toward the end, were just thinking about, okay, this is the year it has to come out because something was happening in our society where the film just seemed like it would be so relevant. And it seemed like within 6 months, something else was happening. Within 6 months, something else was happening. And Joy had put a few of those in the film. And one of the producer at World Channel made an excellent point, that if you put those in 10 years, it's going to date the film, even though those things were relevant. But unfortunately, as I said, something else worse, happened in the course of 6 months to a year. So yes, relevance. I think that film will always be relevant because just Joy mentioning what's happening in LA. It's protests about equality, racial protests still happening. As Kate said, 70 years later. So I mean, it's sad, but it's true.
If I could piggyback on that, that moment when Chris was like, "We have to take all the modern footage out." you know, at the time I was disappointed because it felt really important, you know, and I'm so glad that he insisted, because you don't need to make that point. You know, when you're watching the film, you don't need to see modern footage to see today in action. The gas masks of the folks beating people at Selma, or the stories of being beaten in jail, it would be gilding the lily. It's unnecessary. It's exactly the same. And every week something worse happens. So when do you draw that line? I'm really glad that Chris convinced us to do that.
I wanted to go back to what Monica said earlier. I know we're about to open it to the audience. I wanted to talk about her forced sterilization, Kate. The brutal rape she endured in jail were deeply traumatic, yet they also ignited her activism. How did these violations strip her of fear and help shape the radical clarity of her purpose?
So she was sterilized in 1961. She had some fibroid tumors and they were benign. The woman that she cleaned the house for, her cousin was a doctor, and she said, go see Dr. Doro, that was his name, Charles Doro, and he'll take care of those tumors and that discomfort, and then maybe you'll be able to carry a pregnancy to term. So Fannie Lou went to the hospital, and he did not tell her that he sterilized her. He gave her a hysterectomy instead of taking the tumors out. And she didn't find out until she was recuperating at home, and a woman that was cleaning the white woman's home overheard a conversation where the woman said, oh yes, Dr. Doro sterilized her. And she became completely depressed. Her mother died that same year, so it was like a double whammy. And, you know, she'd been fighting and struggling for so long. And I think she contemplating just giving up and just doing her work and not doing anything ever again. But something happened when those kids showed up, the SNCC workers showed up a few months later in 1962. There was something about Fannie Lou Hamer that even though she may have wanted to give up, she really didn't want to give up. She healed and she went to that meeting in the church that night, and that changed her life. And when she was arrested a year later and thrown in jail and brutally beaten and raped, it made her more determined than ever. As she said, and you have that beautiful quote in the film, they've been trying to kill me my whole life. You know, what difference does it make now? I'm just going to keep fighting. I'm paraphrasing, but that she was not going to give up. There were other people in the community she was going to fight for. She didn't want another woman to have a Mississippi appendectomy, and they were very common across the country. And do you know that it wasn't outlawed to give a woman a hysterectomy without her permission until 1973, which is stunning, stunning.
Wow. Can I do one last question? And this is for anyone. I like many of the men who became civil rights icons: MLK, Medgar Evers. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't have a formal education. I think she dropped out at sixth grade. Yet she made herself impossible to ignore. Can we talk about that? I'm thinking about in the film, one of the leaders, I forgot his name, NAACP.
Roy Wilkins.
Yeah, how he dismissed her because of her lack of education. So can we talk about that? I think this question is anyone can answer.
I have opinions about this, which is why that clip is in the film, because she was routinely denigrated by her allies, by people who were practicing respectability politics. And they said, we don't want this uneducated woman on stage, because they thought that she made them look bad. And it's just the opposite, you know, like she didn't have Ivy League credentials, but she was educated. She was learned, and she knew what she was talking about. And I think it was a threat to the people who had those credentials that somebody who didn't go through the filtering process of respectability politics could come up and tell the truth and activate people in a way that they could not, because they were doing this sort of poll tested, centrist method that was not going to move anybody. And Fannie Lou Hamer just went up and told the truth. She didn't worry if it was popular. She didn't worry if it had been tested, if the message had been, worked through committee. She just went up and told people about her experience, and that resonated. And that's what was missing. And that was a threat to the people that held institutional power. So a lot of the tapes that Monica and I dug up, like she said, they were mislabeled. They didn't even say that she was on there. I think Monica found one where it was just labeled like overweight woman. That was how she was identified on the tape. And so she was not given respect even by her own peers. And that is infuriating, especially as we've all just experienced her voice and her story and how incisive it is and how passionate and true it is, that anybody would think that she doesn't deserve to speak. Those people need to sit down. And I feel like that's still the Democratic Party today, honestly.
I was thinking about the Freedom Democratic Party, the
Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party.
Like, we need that now. I'll open it up for the audience.
This actually goes really well. You answered half of the question already. They would like to know more about Fannie Lou Hamer's relationship with other civil rights figures. They asked about Roy Wilkins, but did she have conflict with, for example, MLK and the SCLC, or with SNCC under Stokely Carmichael?
I do have answers, but I don't want to dominate the conversation.
I'll just say that she did have conflicts with some of the other leaders, but the conflict came from them, mostly the male leaders. And as Joy had already said, that they discounted her because she didn't dress, as far as they were concerned, appropriately, and her voice and her diction, et cetera. They didn't like it. As far as Martin Luther King Jr., they respected each other, but they did not really get along. He had a different vision than she did. And there was the great picture that was here. It shows them marching together, and Martin Luther King is being interviewed by all the press, and she's right there, and she's singing her lungs out while he's trying to answer questions to the reporters. And I thought, go ahead, Fannie, just do it. So, but they had tension, they were not grassroots like she was, and she knew what was happening on the ground. And so that was.
That also meant that she had allies among the grassroots, and she could bridge the gap between the young radicals and the old heads to some extent. And so she, Stokely Carmichael was mentioned, and that was a relationship of great mutual respect. And I feel like she was more aligned with him and with Malcolm X and other people that were considered more radical at the time. And Malcolm X called her America's #1 freedom fighting woman. He was right. So I think that was also perhaps kind of threatening, because the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was founded as a splinter group from the SCLC, because there was talk of like, well, the SCLC is kind of like these like middle-aged business church folks, and like the youth need a vehicle, and so they were going to make a youth wing of that. And Ella Baker stepped in and said like, no, that the youth need to have their own thing. And so she stepped down from her role as a secretary with the SCLC and helped found SNCC, and became the mother of that movement, and was also a mentor to Mrs. Hamer. Ella Baker needs her own movie. Speaking of titans of the movement who haven't gotten their due, but so Fannie Lou was much more oriented with the youth in terms of the radical energy, because they could feel the sincerity. There's nothing that young folks hate more than phoniness. And so they knew that she was telling the truth. They knew that she wasn't going to use them, and that what she said was what she would do, and her word was her bond. So that's really what drew me to her as well. I felt like one of those students when I was learning about her and reading about what she did. And I thought, I can be one of those students. I can join this movement 50 years later, and it's just as fresh as ever. That's her power.
Are there any questions? Oh, we have a question here.
Thank you all so much for this wonderful documentary and for this discussion. I'm wondering if you could share more about Fannie Lou Hamer's opposition to the Vietnam War, and if she saw the liberation of Americans tied to the liberation of Vietnamese people and a shared history of colonialism and imperialism.
Well, I'll talk about that a bit. She was a very early opponent of the Vietnam War, and she resented the fact that young Black men were being drafted into the army to go to Vietnam. They didn't have the right to vote, many of them, and that they were going to fight in another country when the country that they were fighting for, America basically, was not respecting them and treating them as equal citizens. She just thought that this is ridiculous. What are you doing? And going over and fighting someone else's war, she really resented that tremendously.
She especially resented, if you're going to send the troops halfway across the world to help them build democracy in Vietnam, are you going to send the troops to Mississippi next to build democracy right here at home? It felt hypocritical to her, and it was a cruel bargain to make, to say you can have, if you're in the military, you can be supported financially, you can have educational opportunities, but it never came true for the Black men that were being drafted into it. And even for the Black men who came back from World War II, like Medgar Evers, came back having experienced freedom in places like France, where they were fighting to liberate, and they were shoulder to shoulder with white Europeans, and then they come back here and they're treated once again like second-class citizens, even though their white counterparts were welcomed like heroes. So Vietnam was like a worse version of that for Mrs. Hamer, seeing, okay, well, look what they did to Medgar, and now look what they're doing to the next generation of Black men, and they're bleeding us dry.
We have another question.
Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful panel. My question's for all the panelists. I want to go back to the point about the choice you made with the film to have Fannie Lou Hamer's voice be the one voice. And I'm wondering if there's anything you wish she had talked about, but she didn't, that you would have liked to include in the film, but you couldn't because it was something that she didn't talk about. And I guess, Kate, you can also answer that in terms of writing her biography, because, if there's anything that's still left outside the record that you wish there were some traces of, so that you could have put it in.
Well, I'm going to let Joy answer this first.
It's a pretty easy answer, and it's a story that you've already told, Kate. The story of her forced sterilization. There are bits and pieces of her mentioning it, but I was not able to find a contiguous story that we could put in her own words without having to force some filmmaking trick of text on screen or assembling sentences out of individual phrases, and we just couldn't make it fit. But I really wish that we could have put that in the film.
Yeah, I have a thought about that also, because as I mentioned, when I first wanted to do this film, I wanted it to be her family talking about, what her life was like prior to that. And when Joy said, well, let's do it in her voice, I'm very glad that she stuck with that. But unfortunately, there just was no footage. There was no archival audio footage to support that. She just did not talk about her family life. She spoke about, being tricked into picking cotton when she was 6 years old, and, her family being so poor and it being 20 of them. But that's it. She didn't even speak about her daughter, Dorothy, very much. And so that was what I really wanted, was to explore the family side based on the stories that I heard. But the footage was just not there. And so what we kept finding is what Joy, put in the film, and so much more. And I really respect Joy's decision to stick with just her voice, because she can tell you, when we were trying to sell this to different platforms, to air this, some of them, they were insistent, no, we're not going to touch it unless you have, a narrator, or talking heads. And, Joy was like, no, this is going to be in her voice and her voice only. And so they passed on accepting the film. And I just want to mention briefly, I thought it was so moving and gut-wrenching. I later, after the film was broadcast, I received an email from one of those people that had rejected the film, and she apologized. And she said, I'm sorry that I was so short-sighted. I wanted a narrator. She was like, it's so beautifully done. Congratulations. And basically, again, I'm sorry. I thought that was momentous. And so while a lot of things that we wanted did not make the final cut, Joy being adamant in that decision to just be her voice, I think really paid off.
We have time for one more question, Victoria.
Hi, Monica. Victoria Marsh here. I wanted to see if you could talk to us more about the extra footage, the footage that ended up on the cutting room floor, and your efforts to put it on your website.
Good to hear your voice, Victoria. Victoria is an advocate at GBA, if this is the same Victoria Marsh, but there was footage from the David Frost show that Joy had, I think, in the first rough cut, where Aunt Fannie Lou had this dialogue. I can't recall the woman's name, but she was pictured briefly in the film. And she was some kind of suffragette, she was an author and activist. And, she's talking about what life was like, for her growing up, kind of trying to compare herself to what Aunt Fannie Lou's life was like. And Aunt Fannie Lou just had to school her. And Joy depicted that so beautifully in the first rough cut. And they cut it. They did not allow it. We had more footage from, I think it was Brown's Journal, where Joy was talking about how Aunt Fannie Lou was considered a radical. They had two sides of speakers on the Tony Brown show, and one side were, the activists, well, I'll say educated or whatever. But here on the other side, they had Aunt Fannie Lou seated with the radicals, Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis, because that was her personality. And so things like that. There was footage of her talking about the young girl, her name just went right up, Joey Collier, who was murdered in Drew on her graduation day. Aunt Fannie Lou was determined, to bring back, before the national public, we couldn't use that. I mean, it's just so much footage. And so what I hope to do, again, is to make our website a clearinghouse of all things Fannie Lou Hamer, so that, again, if someone is looking for a particular film or news interview that she was in, they can find it. Because, again, we were looking for things, and she was just described, overweight colored woman. She didn't matter, and that's unfortunate because she had so much to say. So yeah, there's a lot of footage. She was on Cup Show twice, a lot of different newsreels with David Brinkley, the McNeil-Lehrer report. I mean, it's just so much that we could not include.
The Tony Brown show is on YouTube. If anybody wants to look it up, I think it's Black Leadership Forum 72 or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the full thing is on YouTube. It's got time codes on it, but if you want to watch it, it's like an hour of the black excellence over the early 70s with the Congressional Black Caucus and Black Wall Street, and Mrs. Hamer sitting next to Angela Davis and Stokely Carmichael speaking truth. You can find that.
Well, I want to thank you all. So Joy and Monica, congratulations on this extraordinary film. And thank you so much for participating in this important conversation. Tato, thank you so much again for your exquisite moderation. Monica, you are here with us in spirit, even though you're on the screen. And I want to thank all of you. And I want to thank Fannie Lou Hamer for her voice. I have goosebumps right this very moment, and I'm getting very emotional. This is an extraordinary, exquisite film. And we are honored that you allowed us this opportunity to screen the film. And to our audience, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And let's continue this work.
As you said, Joy, this is a moment in time for us. So thank you all so very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.